All right, good evening, everyone. As you start to enter into our live broadcast, I am obviously not Dr. Leslyn Lewis, but my name is Steve Outhouse, and I serve as Dr. Lewis's campaign manager. We're really glad that you're able to join us here this evening for our Facebook Live. We're going to be bringing Dr. Lewis on here in just a moment, trying out some new technology. So we just want to give folks time to get into the room, get situated. The topic this evening is going to be the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty. Dr. Lewis had posted a petition yesterday on her social media channels, and the response has really been overwhelming. We've had over 10,000 people sign this petition in less than 24 hours. Lots of new people who are interested in kind of learning more about what's going on, or were already concerned about this and not feeling that their voice was being heard on this important issue. And so we're very glad to be able to have some of you here this evening, saying hello from Nova Scotia, my home province, Belinda. Glad to have you here. And so tonight's going to be a little bit of a discussion. It's going to be a chance for Dr. Lewis to talk through a few points about our healthcare sovereignty. And this is one of those topics that's very sensitive, and it's one that people like to twist and try to turn into and just simply dismiss as making allegations of conspiracy theories and so on. So this is a bit of a longer form conversation, or a bit of a presentation that Dr. Lewis will walk us through and talk about some points of international law and so on. I'm not going to get into the content because she's the expert and not me. And then we're going to have a little time for some questions and answers as we, after she wraps up her part. And we hope it's going to be a constructive time. We're so glad that you're able to join us on the various social media channels, whether you're here from Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We're really glad that you're here. And so we're getting some good numbers coming in here. And I'm just going to say, if you haven't signed the treaty yet, if you haven't signed the treaty yet, if you haven't signed the petition yet about the treaty, it is on Dr. Lewis's social media channels, and the link is in the description for our event tonight. So after you've had a chance to listen to it, if you're not familiar with the topic and you feel that you are in agreement with Dr. Lewis, you can go ahead and sign on to that so that she knows that you're with her on this topic. For those of you who are new to politics overall and haven't really been following things up till now, just a quick word to make sure that you're aware that Dr. Leslyn Lewis is running to be the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And standing up for Canada's sovereignty is obviously one of the core values, of her campaign, and something she feels very strongly about. If you wish to be able to vote for Dr. Lewis to help her become the next leader of the Conservative Party, you need to have a membership, and that is a $15 cost. And we'll be putting up the link here from time to time. In fact, it's just popped up there. You can go to leslynlewis.ca. And there'll be a membership link that you can click there. And so if you want to be able to vote for Dr. Lewis in the leadership race, that is where you'll need to go and purchase a membership. So with that, so we see Reese from Cochrane, Alberta. Great to have you there. I was out in Cochrane last summer. Great place. I'm going to bring in Dr. Lewis here in just a moment and have her start through her presentation and sharing a bit here this evening. And then, as I said, we'll get into a time of questions and answers. So if you want to put your questions and answers in the into the chat, we'll be able to grab some of those and turn it over at the end of the evening. So with that, I'm going to add Dr. Lewis to the stream. I'm going to take prominence. So Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for hosting this live stream this evening. And I know you've been getting a lot of questions and comments about this topic. So maybe we'll turn over to you for just maybe a word of introduction and hello, and to let folks know why you thought it was important to talk on this topic. And then I know you've got a bit of a presentation for us, so we'll let you take it from here. So I'll take myself.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight on this Facebook Live alert. A few weeks ago, I alerted you to a meeting, or to meetings that took place in December between 190 plus nations regarding the creation of the World Health Organization Global Pandemic Treaty, which would basically potentially turn over our healthcare monitoring of our country during pandemics to the WHO. And by the way of update, a meeting is scheduled at the World Health Assembly next week during May 22nd to the 28th. And that meeting will deal with amendments to the international health regulations, which I have the document right here, and I'm going to go through it with you. Currently, under the WHO, a sovereign nation like Canada can abide by the WHO recommendations or follow their own agenda. They are trying to amend this so that in October, the World Health Pandemic Treaty would take effect. It's not fully drafted yet. It's just in the talks right now, and they're going to have consultations, etc. But at that point, after it's signed, the WHO would be in total control of global pandemics. And once this is done, all signatory nations must adhere to what is agreed to in this document. So currently, the current regime is that the WHO can make recommendations or suggestions, but after this treaty comes into effect, they become orders. And I'll reference you this document. You can find it online on the WHO website. It's called Strengthening WHO Preparedness and for Response to Health Emergency, Proposals for Amendments to the International Health Regulations of 2005. And this document is dated April 12th, 2022. So these are the proposals to the amendments. And currently, the amendments that the health regulations that we have deal with things such as sanitation. And they came in, and we've had them since 2005, and they've worked very, very well. But now they're being modified so that it is in line with the proposed global pandemic treaty that we'll talk about later. So I'm going to turn first to Article 10 just to prove what I'm saying about it no longer becomes a recommendation. And I'll read that out for you. And you can find the document online and go and look up this information yourself so that you have this information. And this is Article 10 that I'm going to read from. And the provisions that is very concerning is that if the state party do not accept the offer of collaboration within 48 hours, the WHO shall, and they took out the word may. In the old document, it was may. Now it shall, when justified by the magnitude of public health risk, immediately share with other state parties the information available to it, whilst encouraging the state party to accept the offer of collaboration by the WHO. And then, and you'll see the part that's taken out says taking into account the views of state party concerns. So that is actually removed, which is very, very concerning. And one of the issues that I'm very, very concerned about with this amendment to the international health regulations. Also, the World Health Assembly, which is the governing body of the WHO, they are meeting to formalize this document, and then later they will meet to deal with the World Health Pandemic Treaty. The issues that I have is that Canada could potentially become a signatory to the Global Health Pandemic Treaty, and that would result in turning over our healthcare sovereignty to a global organization, essentially the WHO. In less than 1 week, and that's next week, the vote will take place in Geneva at the World Health Assembly to amend this document that I was talking to you about, which is the precursor to the Global Pandemic Treaty. 194 nations belonging to United Nations will attend, and the treaty could be signed as early as October 2022. If the treaty is signed, over 99.4% of the world's population would be controlled by the WHO in the case of a pandemic, and this would include Canada. All 194 nations would be ceding their sovereignty over their national health care decisions to this global organization, the WHO. And that means that the WHO would have the authority to intervene and set Canadian healthcare policy during a pandemic without the consent of this nation. It's very, very concerning. The WHO could impose any type of restriction on countries that sign on to the treaty. So, for example, if they declare that there is a pandemic, and a pandemic could be defined as a stroke, heart attack, like COVID, rise in depression, anything. It's a broad definition. And this then could dictate how Canada should react. It will give power to impose, for example, complete lockdowns. It could give power for states to determine whether or not, for the WHO to determine whether or not a country like Canada, whether you'd be able to travel within or outside of the country, depending on the severity of the pandemic. They could also set a list of acceptable medications that your doctor could prescribe for treatment, or potentially which one is prohibited. There's no stipulation to provide data in order to substantiate their decisions. And I want to go and show you the clause that actually refers to this, and it's provision 9.1 in the amendments that refers to that. I don't want to go through everything with you, but you could just go through this document and see that there's no requirement to provide to substantiate their decision. So we as a country have not even done an assessment about how we dealt with COVID. And I think that it's very, very problematic, for one, for us to sign this amendment, and two, for us to be contemplating a global pandemic treaty when we do not even know how we have dealt with it, whether our actions were sufficient, whether they can be modified, or whether we can have our own pandemic plan. I believe that we need to think seriously about a post-pandemic assessment and of our policies to see what we did well, and if there are any ways that we could improve on the policies that we had during COVID. It's, I think, essential for us to create our own pandemic response. I don't believe that we should enter into a treaty that would give the WHO powers over our healthcare sovereignty during a pandemic. It would be essentially allowing the WHO to suspend our constitution, or the constitutions of signatory nations, and set healthcare policy for the entire world. It's indirectly using the World Health Emergency to exercise domination over the constitutions of signatory nations. And it's very, very disturbing that the WHO is being used as the kind of serendipitously to grab power of our healthcare sovereignty, and arguably ushering global powers. It's really concerning, because we've seen that the WHO has in the past given very unclear signals, and there were a lot of issues about the management of COVID. We cannot rely on the WHO, and it's imperative that we prepare our own pandemic plan. The treaty will be laying the foundation for an area of global governments, and it's essentially starting with healthcare, but it also creates the infrastructure for other areas where sovereign nations could cede their right to these global organizations. I believe this is a huge power grab, and the vote to amend the international health regulations that will take place next week in Geneva at the World Health Assembly is something that you need to take very, very seriously. Contact your member of parliament and let them know that if you believe that we should not be supporting this amendment, let that be known. Because as I said, it's the precursor to the treaty. The treaty will be finalized, and it's expected that it would be voted on or about October 2022 of this year. So the time to act is now, because these amendments have a clause in it, in Article 22 of the main WHO Constitution. It will take effect if there is no response within 6 months. So this amendment says that the Article 22 of the main WHO Constitution, which you can find on the WHO website, will supersede everything. So meaning that it will take effect even if we don't sign on to this, it will be deemed effective after 6 months. And that's in Article 59 of this document. So you can go through and you can read that for yourself. So if this vote goes through, the global authority of our healthcare during pandemics would be transferred to essentially the WHO. We must get our House of Commons and our Senate involved. If you want to change the impact on this, you must write to your MPs or your senators or the Senate House leader. We have very little time to save to act, because as I said, the vote on this amendment does take place next week. This, I believe, is a great attack on our sovereignty as Canadians. And we have to, if you believe that this is something that you do not wish to have, you have to get involved and make your voice be heard. I don't believe that we should allow Justin Trudeau to give away our Canadian sovereignty, healthcare sovereignty to the WHO. We can't allow a global organization to have authority over our health care and over our freedom. It's a very slippery slope, and other global authoritarian abuses can also emerge from this precedent. This amendment that I'm speaking about outlines what would be proposed in the treaty following, because it would essentially allow the WHO to essentially seize the executive governance power of our country during a pandemic. And this is essentially tantamount to disenfranchising the people. Because think about it, you will not be able to hold your elected officials accountable for the actions of the WHO. And it is essentially eroding our democracy. Canadians elect their government, not the WHO. And me, myself, as an elected representative, an elected member of parliament, I cannot just sit back and not share this document with you that's going to be voted on next week. I was elected to act in the best interest of the people, and I just cannot sit back and not share this information with you. So the amendment to the subsequent treaty will suspend the normal operations of any signatory nation under the under the pandemic, and give the power to the WHO. If you believe that you should maintain the right to control our healthcare sovereignty during a pandemic, please contact your elected official. The over-reliance on global organizations is contributing to what I believe is the decline of our democracy right here in our country, and ceding our authority to the WHO is basically relinquishing our healthcare sovereignty to global elites. I believe it's very important for you to act now. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to provide you with any more information. Time is of the essence. I will put the link of the documents that I referred to in the feed and urge you to please take this seriously. You can pass on the link. You can text your friends, and you can also contact your member of parliament, as I stated. And it's essential because in less than the week, the vote will take place. I also want you to also research who funds the WHO, and that will tell you a lot of uh, information that you need to know about where the money comes from the WHO. I urge everybody watching this video to reach out to their friends, send them a text message, write to your members of parliament, let your MPs know that if you don't want if you don't want to be a signatory to this amendment, please voice your opinion. You have the power, and we must act to protect the sovereignty of our nation. We cannot sit back and watch our rights to democratic recourse be stripped away this way. So thank you so much. Please get involved. Stop the WHO pandemic treaty. Stop the signing of this amendment to the international health regulations. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for that presentation and for sharing detailed information. And I think with so much of today's political debate just sort of being sound bites and sloganeering and just sort of quick, jabs and accusations of conspiracy theories and so on, I think a lot of people appreciate you taking the time to lay out your position and back it up with the documentation that's there. So at the very least, people can have an informed debate and discussion and not just get into one of the stereotypical social media, bun fights, I guess, that happen from time to time. So we have a few questions that we're going to go to. And if you have some other questions, you can go ahead and put them in the comments thread or the stream that's there. And we'll be able to grab a few of those out in the remaining time that we have here. So we have a few more moments. First one is just actually a technical one I wanted to clear up for Wayne Kaz, who put in there, and he just was asking about, he said that he had a 5-year membership. And do I need to buy another one to be able to vote for Leslyn or even another candidate? No, if you already have a 5-year membership in the party, you do not need to. As long as your membership is current, you can vote in the upcoming election. And just a reminder for folks, and we'll put up that link here now, perhaps that just if you wish to buy a membership, if you don't already have one and you would like to vote for Dr. Lewis to become the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, you can only do that if you've purchased a membership. And it costs $15. You can go to leslynlewis.ca and buy that there and have your chance to pick the next future leader of the Conservative Party, and we believe the next Prime Minister of Canada. Tammy asked a question, Dr. Lewis. She says, has the treaty been discussed in the House of Commons yet? Could you address Tammy's question?
Well, it was discussed today. I presented a question on it, and specifically I was asking about the international health regulations and the amendment, the Biden proposed amendment to those regulations. And so I posed 2 questions on it today. We should probably have those clipped and up soon. And so you'll be able to see the question that I posed. But other than that, I have not heard any discussions of it to date.
Okay, thanks so much. Next question here from Nita. It says, with such short notice and what they're hearing or what you're telling people tonight, what can they do to move upon this critical issue that might be proceeding without the consent of the Canadian people?
Well, as I said, I provided the link to the document so that you know it's a real document, because it just appears that this thing is just occurring very, very, I won't use the word secretly, but it's just not public. And so I want people to have the document, to know that it's a real document. And it's a very, very short amendment, so you could get through it. And I've highlighted the most salient sections which really undermine our sovereignty, I do believe. And so you can send around that document. You can text message your friends and family members, let them know what's happening, get involved, contact your member of parliament, contact the House leader, the Senate leader, senators, and let them know that this vote is going to take place next week, that we Canada does not want to be a signatory to this amendment, and that's the most important thing. During the summer, there will be meetings and consultations about the Global Pandemic Treaty, and it's anticipated that the final wording and drafting of the treaty will be finalized in around August of this year, and it's anticipated that it could be ready for signing by October.
Okay. Next, I'm going to go to a question from Stephanie, who says, what would happen if this treaty passes and Canadians want it reversed? Is anyone in our government accountable after it passes to answer to our displeasure? And now you're you've not been a career politician. You're fairly new to the political scene, but you are someone with international law background, Dr. Lewis, and being an international lawyer. What would you say to Stephanie about what happens if this is passed by the current Liberal government? What about the future?
Well, I don't want to give legal advice, but I can tell you that treaties are generally entered into on consent of a nation. You have to consent to it, and so you could get out of a treaty afterwards. You could pull out of it.
Okay, so we're coming up on the end of our time here today. I just wanted to ask a general question for folks who are watching this evening. So you were interviewed by media on this topic, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago now. I've kind of, it all becomes a blur during the campaign. And there were a lot of, I think anytime you talk about an international organization, it starts to immediately, it's just so easy for people to dismiss concerns as conspiracy theories and being an alarmist and those types of things. So what would you say to folks if they're having discussions about this with people that they care about and their family and their friends and they're on social media? What type of advice can you give and content, which you've given tonight, that might be able to help them have, hopefully some constructive conversations about this to raise the issue and not simply just have the concerns dismissed?
Well, it's very simple. We elect our members of parliament to represent us. And so in any actions that are being taken on behalf of the Canadian public, somebody should be accountable. And when we cede our authority to the WHO, those elected officials are no longer accountable. Right now, we can insist on a public inquiry for everything that happened during COVID, the good, the bad, and we can learn from that inquiry. We can learn about what we did well, what we didn't do well, what we could improve on. Now, if the WHO has the authority to dictate how we respond in a pandemic, then our elected officials are no longer responsible and accountable to us. And so in a sense, it's eroding our democracy. And so that's the problem with ceding over our healthcare sovereignty to an unelected global organization. And it's very important. And if we can do that with our healthcare sovereignty, then why wouldn't we be able to do that in another area with our monetary policy, with different aspects of how we function? And so I believe it's a slippery slope, and it's something that everyone should take seriously, because we have to, if we believe in our democracy, we should ensure that we preserve it.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. We're going to wrap that up there now, and we wish everyone a good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm just going to put up an email address here, the vote@leslynlewis.ca. So it's important, if you are joining the party, or if you have questions about joining the party, or you want to just let us know you have a membership and you want to let us know for sure that you're supporting Dr. Lewis. It helps us if we identify her supporters and we know how to reach you. We can make sure you get all the instructions on how to vote and things as the campaign progresses, and we get closer to that later on. So drop us a line at vote@leslynlewis.ca. We have some very friendly people who staff the inbox there, and they'd be happy to hear from you. And make sure that, if you have comments that you want passed along to Dr. Lewis or the team, or you have questions yourself, then we can get back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Did you have anything you wanted to say in closing?
just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining me this evening and for hearing about this very, very important issue. I hope that we will continue to talk about it, and I hope that we will have a resolution to this international health regulations amendment.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Again, you can go to Dr. Lewis's social media channels, and the petition is there if you wish to sign it. If you're in agreement with that, we'd love to know that you stand with more than 10,000 Canadians so far and growing, who say that they are concerned about this issue and want to see the treaty stop. So, thank you for your time this evening. Thanks for your attention. It's been great having so many comments in the chat from across the country. We wish you all the best, and God bless. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.